Hey everybody, welcome to my next listing. Yeah, I know I've been doing these big high-end ones here lately, but when you get them this nice, you got to roll with it, right? Here is another super killer Kenwood KP-9010 direct drive semi-automatic turntable. It's in really nice shape. It does have a couple of marks on it, so it's going to make the price a little bit better than the last couple that have sold for a freaking fortune. But it's been recapped and restored. It is ready to rock. Man, let's go ahead and take a look at the features and functions of this really, really cool machine. So I hope you guys are all doing well. We're doing okay. I was sick here last maybe a little over a week or so, man. Last week I just wasn't feeling it at all, man. Getting better now. We had 80 and 30 in the same week here. That's probably it, you know. Snoop Dogg is around here somewhere. He'll probably pop in a minute. He's doing fine as well. Still doing that licking thing. He had a mole on his leg and he licked through it, and that was kind of a nightmare. But he seems to be getting past that. He's a dog. He's doing fine. Anyway, let me talk about this turntable real quick. It is, as I mentioned, the top of the line of the Kenwood Black Series. This is the 9010. It's been recapped and restored. I changed all the electrolytics out to Elnas and Nichicons and Panasonics. And I lubed the motor, and I lubed the arm and the VTA tube, and I adjusted the end sensor, cleaned all the front panel switches, set the variable resistors. There's already two of them, but I set those with my voltmeter and checked all the speeds and everything with a scope. It is ready to rock. Now this thing does have a couple little marks on it. It's going to make it a little bit more affordable, but you can see it looks dead nuts mint. There's two scuffs on the ring, where there's one right here, and there's the one here that's a little bit worse right here. I don't know how the hell those got on there. They were on it when I got it. I can't really see how something could have came off or whatever, but they just kind of correspond with these end marks here. But the rest of this plinth, man, nice and shiny and black. Couple little lines back here too. Nothing crazy. But you know, a lot of these Kenwoods, if maybe you don't know, the dust cover will react with these corners, and you'll see these little white, like scab looking things there. This doesn't have any of that. So it must have spent most of its life not having a dust cover on it. So that makes it really cool. And back here, it's also explained by the fact that these are the original factory hinges, and they are still in great shape. The bane of Kenwood turntables is these big heavy dust covers will break through these plastic deals here. There's like a spring in there, and that bar from that spring will break through that plastic. So obviously this thing did not have the dust cover on it for most of its life. It's probably displayed as such without one. But again, man, the last couple I've sold have been like $1,450 and $1,500. This one here is $1,350. So, plus your shipping. This is the best deal on a 9010 I've had in a long, long time. And performance-wise, holy shit, man, it keeps up with everything. This thing is ready to rock. Speaking of rock, my band today is a request. Yes. Hey, Paul, what's happening? Paul in Boston suggested this band to me, even sent me a record and goes, hey man, check this band out. And I knew about this band, but I'd done a lot of Boston bands, already, and I don't have enough personal affinity to Boston. There's just a lot of good rock and roll come out of there. But we're going to talk today about one of probably the biggest unsung heroes of Boston, the band that would have made it, maybe should have made it, maybe could have made it, but they done fucked up. Let's go ahead and talk about the Del Fuegos. So my band of the day is Boston's Del Fuegos. Okay. Now, like I said earlier, depending on who you talk to, they either burned out, that's pun intended, sold out, you'll hear about that in a minute, or just ran out of 80s. Because by the end of the decade, they formed in 1980, by the end of by 1990, they were done. They're already done, but chastised. Done. So, anyway, the band forms in 1980. Warren and Dan Zanes, brothers, 19 and 16 years old. They form this band. They get their high school buddy, Tom Lloyd, to play bass, and they get original drummer was Steve Morrell. And they just started gigging. They played every shit show, every gymnasium, car wash opening, frat house, anywhere they could plug in. They just scuffled for a good 3 years and built up a really good following. So much so that Slash Record, I take it back. They did a little EP, they started working on an EP with a local label in Boston, but Slash Records from LA, the indie label here, you see, they took them on, they signed with them, and they did their first full-length record. And it was really raw. It was really kind of, a lot more rocky, punky, a little bit to it, right? It got rave reviews. I mean, rave reviews. Every magazine, back when Rolling Stone mattered, Rolling Stone called them the band of the year, which of course opened up their world to a whole bunch of shit. Good and bad, but mostly good, right, at that time. So this is their second album, Boston Man. This is my favorite record of theirs. They got Mitchell Froom to come in and produce. Now, this is where I tell you to stop your tape machine or stop your whatever you're doing there. Put your drink down. Go Google Mitchell Froom. This was one of his earliest gigs as a producer. Before this, he was a big time session musician. Matter of fact, he worked on Marshall Crenshaw's Downtown that I worked on. He was playing keyboards in it. So anyway, this is one of his earliest gigs. Okay, but he went on from here and did all the Crowded House records and Bonnie Raitt, and he got won Grammys with Los Lobos, and uber producer after this. But this was one of his early gigs, and he polished up their sound, but still gave them a rock and roll edge. Because remember, by 1985, when this came out, that was MTV time. So you had to have a look, you had to have a sound that fit, right? So I like this record. I think it's really good. It's different than the first record. It's not nearly as raw, but it's still good. Okay. And anyway, so they're getting more, accolades and stuff and the whole bit, I mean, none of these records sold. It's crazy. You'd be band of the year and none of these records got out of the top 100. But that was okay. They were faithful. They're doing their thing, whatever. And somebody somewhere made the Cardinals Sin. Now, in 2023, you're going to think this is a fucking joke. But in 1985, it wasn't. What killed this band was they did a beer commercial. Okay? In 85, they did a Miller Beer TV commercial. Now, maybe they thought that, because it was Miller Beer and not Pop-Tarts or Chevrolet or something, it'd be cool. But they literally are singing a song that somebody wrote, probably them, I don't know, about Miller Beer. The commercial, you can find it on YouTube. It's them loading their shitty gear into a shitty van, going to a shitty bar with a neon sign and all these poser actor girls, holding Miller beers just right so you can see the labels. And they're sitting there talking about how people can tell whether or not you're authentic. It was not a good look, okay, in 85. Any of you old fucks like me, remember, by 85, when MTV came in, there was a distinct difference in rock and roll. There was your Journeys and your Styxes and your, Def Leppards and that kind of ilk. And then there was these indie bands like Del Fuegos and Romantics and other stuff like that, who there was like a big chasm between those. People thought that, those bigger bands were more of a sellout and these guys were more authentic. And when they did this commercial, especially when they're singing a fucking song about Miller Beer, not a good look. Anyway, Spin Magazine wrote a scathing article about them. It was bad, okay? The album tanked. They still toured with Tom Petty and ZZ Top and all that stuff. Now, here's the fucking thing about it, okay? Back then, tons of bands were doing Miller Beer ads, okay? Jimmy Buffett and Dave Mason and ZZ Top, they would do dedicated songs about Miller Beer, but they just wouldn't go on TV with them. They would do radio spots, and they would send them to radio stations around the country, and you'd hear Dave Mason singing about Miller Beer. You'd hear Jimmy Buffett singing about Miller Beer, right? But they were on these radio tapes that they would send to radio stations, and then when a new one came out, the radio station would just get rid of them. They were never meant to be heard beyond that market, right? Well, thank you, YouTube. If you go right now, you can hear Dave Mason and Jimmy Buffett and stuff. Somebody on there found these tapes and archived them. So these guys, they're out there opening for ZZ Top. They're out there opening for, these guys. They probably thought it was okay. And of course, they're a fucking broke-ass band from Boston. They're trying to make rent, for God's sakes, okay? But anyway, when the Spin Magazine article came out, it just eviscerated these guys and the Long Riders and the Del Fuegos, not Fuegos, the Cruzados and the DBs, all these other bands that had done these Miller ads, just eviscerated them. So it kind of killed them. They're dead in the water. They did a record after this one in 87 called Stand Up. Tom Petty guested on it. They went on a tour with Tom Petty, but it was kind of over. I mean, they weren't commercial enough to be Tom Petty commercial. They weren't underground enough now to be that because they sold out. So they got caught in the mix. They got dropped by Slash Records eventually. Warren and the new drummer Woody G, they quit the band. Warren later said in interviews it was because his brother wouldn't give him any publishing. He aced him out of all the songwriting, so he's like, fuck him, I'm leaving. They replaced those guys. They did one more album in like 89, but by 90, they did a little mini tour in Europe and it was over. It was dead. It was, put a fork in it, Johnny, it's over. Until 2011, okay? So now I'm gonna do my Paul Harvey and let's talk about the rest of the story. In 2011, by that time, 10 years gone by, all these guys have been really successful doing other things. Tom Lloyd got a doctorate in engineering. He was actually an investment analyst. He ran a homeless shelter. I mean, he was multi-talented, uber successful dude on that, right? The drummer, Woody G, was a recovering addict, but he formed this program to help addicts that was really big. Says it's a pilot program that was doing really, really well, okay? Dan Zanes, by this time, had become, in his own world, he'd won a Grammy, for God's sake. Him and his wife at the time started what they called family music. They were living in New York City and they had kids. And they're like, well, there's no music. There's kids music, there's adult music, but there's nothing in between that everybody can, all families can listen to. So they kind of went down that route and it did a bunch of records with this stuff. And they won a Grammy and were really successful. And that was cool, right? And then Warren Zanes, at the time, he'd done some solo work and stuff, but he became a VP at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Back when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was putting, rock and roll artists in it. Okay? Not before, not until they got screwed up, but back in the good days. So, their schedules, they all had their lives. But anyway, so in 2011, Woody G, the drummer, gets everybody together in Boston to do a fundraiser for his rehab. And it went so well, the brothers buried the hatchet, the Zane brothers. It went so well that they ended up doing a mini tour. They played like 8 dates around the country. And the Zane brothers put some songs together themselves and did a little EP in 2012. It was cool. It was all good. Then they all went back to their busy lives, okay? Didn't play anything else again until last year, okay? This is the part I said. This is why you don't go by Wikipedia. I mean, it doesn't work. So last year in May, there's a famous club, or was a famous club, in Boston called the Channel. All these bands were making it, came through there on their way up, okay? And the Channel was going to have a tribute celebration. So the guy who used to own it, one of the co-owners of it, he was promoting this show at another club called Roadrunner, because the Channel's closed. And he got the Del Fuegos to get back together. He got Charlie Fahrenheit. Remember I did Fahrenheit? He got guys from the Atlantics to be like a all-star band, and they were just going to do this big old tribute show, and get the Del Fuegos back. It was awesome. These guys, they flew into town, they rehearsed because they hadn't played together in 10 years. It's all going to be great, man. This is awesome. The day of the show, they make an announcement that they have to cancel the show. Well, why they had to cancel the show? This promoter guy didn't get enough insurance. AEG owned the venue, and AEG requires a shit ton of insurance for events. Now because I know a little bit about this, I want to explain this. I mean, the promoter guy got lambasted. I'll get to that in a minute. But in his defense, okay, I got a buddy in Vegas who has like an entertainment production company. They put on shows and, they get bands and stuff. Up until last year, they could get $1 million insurance policy to cover liabilities, drunk people, whatever. That was all that most major companies needed to secure, give you, let them use their venue. Well, for some reason, starting last year, it jumped to $2 million. And it's all my buddy can do to get the financing to put these gigs together. So I'm sure this promoter guy probably didn't know that either. And unfortunately for them, by the time he found out he didn't have enough insurance, it was Memorial Day weekend when the show was going to go on. And there was also, by the way, the big Boston Calling music festival that was going on over at the stadium. So between all of that, all the insurance companies had closed early on Friday. They couldn't get a hold of anybody to get a rider. Ticket sales for this event weren't very good. They only sold maybe 400 or 500 tickets, not because people didn't want to see the Del Fuegos, but because there was huge bands playing over at that festival. So it was shit timing of the date, shit timing of the insurance thing. Anyway, so Warren Zanes, in his infinite wisdom, writes a 2,000-word rant on his Facebook page, and the rest of the band signed off on it, so I can't really just blame him. But he just goes off on how fucked up this promoter guy was and how he took advantage of them and how they came in and rehearsed and paid their own money and there's no way they were going to work with. I mean, it basically just killed any chance of these guys getting back together. I never say never because something will probably happen, but it killed it. It killed it. So anyway, I probably mentioned everybody what they're doing now, except for Warren Zanes. Now you might know him. As I mentioned, these guys opened for Tom Petty a couple times. Warren Zanes ends up writing the Tom Petty biography, the one that came out a couple years before he died, the one where they talk about the heroin addiction and his anger issues, and he wasn't that nice of a guy. I met him once. He wasn't that nice of a guy. Anyway, great musician, one of my favorites. Not that good of a hang. Very, he was just, I'll just stop right there. Anyway, he wrote that book, and it was done really, really well because, one thing Tom told him was, it's your book. I don't want no authorized biography. Warts and all, go ahead and do it. So I'm going to give him props for that. So, and a couple years after the book came out, he died. And they actually never really spoke after the book came out. He never talked to the family. I mean, till right before he died, they spoke again. But long story short, that is the story of what happened to the Del Fuegos and what happened to the Zane brothers and basically what's going on in the world. So let me go ahead now, by request, I'm going to go ahead and fire this up. I'll show you the features here real quick. And we'll play a track here from my favorite Del Fuegos album, oddly enough, called Boston Mass. Thanks for hanging out. So to show you how this works, I did put a cartridge on here. This is my venerable Shure M44G with an Audio-Technica head shell on her. Semi-automatic turntables. So it's pretty straightforward what it does. You got a power button right here that turns it on. And when you turn it on, it defaults to 33. You have a speed control for 33 and 45 here. You come across here, this light here is for the quartz lock. When it locks to speed, that light will be solid. You have up and down, which is your lifter. Start and stop, which is your start and stop, right? As mentioned back here, this is an SME style removable head shell, same as Pioneers and Sonys and Techniques and Denons and JVC. All the majors have this kind of, dedicated type deal, so you can transfer your cartridges back for it. This has the fishing line style anti-skate, which is actually the coolest one because it actually works right. There's a fine line now. I don't know if you can see it in the video or not. I can't, I'm blind as a bat, but as you move it, it lifts that weight up. And if you pull this weight back farther, it pulls more resistance, right? Okay. This thing has VTA adjustment. You have a screw here at like 3 o'clock from the top, and then in the back from like noon, and you put an Allen wrench in there and loosen it, and you can raise and lower the arm to get the cartridge height right, okay? Your lifter bar is right here. That's adjustable for height as well. And then that is really it, guys. I mean, you got ballast style counterweight. This is not no servo, any of that kind of stuff here. Like most machines, these dials are not accurate. Get yourself the $12 Amazon digital stylus gauge and set it up, and Bob's your uncle. There you go. But like I say, when you want to play a record on this thing, you got to have a record on it. You come over here, make sure it's on. You move the arm over where you want it to be. I got it set really high because this doesn't come with a cartridge, and if you want a cartridge, we'll talk about that in a minute. But you start the turntable here, lower the arm here, and let's go ahead and take a listen to the Del Fuegos. And that is the Del Fuegos. So, of course, at the end of this record, it will lift up and shut itself off. You guys know it's semi-automatic. So anyway, let me go ahead and shut this off. Let's go ahead. I'll put the dust cover down, and we'll wrap this up and show you how to make this thing your own. So guys and girls with the dust cover down, let's go to that map. It's another killer Kenwood. Man, I know I've been doing a lot of expensive turntables lately, but they're selling really quick, and honestly, I got most of these before Christmas, and I just didn't get around to getting them going. You probably would have made some cool Christmas presents for people. Good job, Mark. Anyway, like I said, these things are just killer. You guys know this is the top of the line Kenwood. It is highly desirable. This one is in really nice shape. It has those two little scuff marks I showed you. Otherwise, the plinth is in really nice shape. This dust cover is good. It's not perfect. I say I don't have the strength anymore to do these. Like I can't run a buffing wheel and that kind of stuff. But there's no big breaks or cracks or anything like that in it. So anybody with some Novus or, Plastex or whatever can probably really get this thing rocking, But anyway, as I mentioned, this thing is $13.50 plus the shipping. And there's no cartridge, but I'll give you a head shell to go with it. So if you're gonna put your own cartridge on it. But if you need a cartridge, I got used and some couple retip things here. But mostly what I've been doing for me, because I don't make any money on that cartridge. What the fuck do I care? I've been usually just getting new stuff for people. Ordering from Amazon or your favorite dealer or whatever. And I can usually get the stuff in a day. And I can get on here what you want, because a turntable like this, you're not going to want to put an El Cheapo Deluxe cartridge on here unless you just need something to get by. I can put something cheap used on here and get you working, so you can maybe save up after the hit that this turntable is going to be, and get something nicer. But like I say, that's what we get on the email, we get on the phone, we get it figured out. So with all that said, man, I can't thank you guys enough for checking out my stuff. I'm just getting some really awesome comments from people. You guys know I only take Zelle and PayPal friends and family. These turntables sell so quick, I'm really just not taking checks anymore. I mean, people can pay me instantly now, and it's just been, that's the way it's been going. Anyway, next up, I have no idea. I might have an old school manual JVC coming up, and then maybe 2-3 weeks from now, another big Denon. I don't know. It's just, I've just really been winding them down, just been taking my time, trying to pet my dog, enjoy life. I was sick here for a little while. So anyway, if there's something special that you're looking for, hit me up. If I don't have it, I know there's people out there looking for 65Fs and 47Fs. I hear you. I can't find a good 65F. And when I do find them, my buddy goes, man, they get bought up. They get put on auction sites and sold for stupid money where you're not going to want to pay, $1,000 for a 47F or a 65F. I wouldn't. So like I said, there's a limit. I got to find something that's nice and clean and works well and is worthy of restoration, but isn't broken off inside of me, so I have to turn around and break it off inside of you. That's what happens when you don't need the money and you're just doing it for the fun, right? So anyway, God bless all you guys. Thank you so much for checking this thing out. Snoop Dogg didn't come in there, but he's fine. I swear, I haven't got rid of him. He's my boy. I love him to death. Thank you guys so much for the kind comments about Snoop Dogg too. So take care, y'all. Stay tuned for the next one. Email me about this one, and have a good one.